It's an honor today to stand on Martin Luther King Day and talk about a man who represented integrity and passion and stood up for those that didn't always stand up for them or couldn't stand up for themselves. You know, in preparing today, I started thinking about my own children, and I'm going to get back to that in a minute, because a lot of the things that Dr. King taught us were about future generations. And he taught us about being good and service and pouring into other people's lives and not focusing on ourselves. It also reminded me of other men in history that I have learned about as I've grown up, men like William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce was born almost 200 years before Dr. King, and he was an abolitionist in the UK, and he worked his whole life to fight the British government's policy. And it took him 50 years, much like Dr. King, who spent his life fighting for those who couldn't. He also did the same. In fact, President Abraham Lincoln spoke about William Wilberforce in some of his speeches. And what is it with these men and women of history that is key here? And it's really public servant. It's giving up your life for others. And that is what I see with Dr. King specifically, and that's what I want to talk about with my kids here. 200 years later, he picked up that mantle on the floor, the steps of the Capitol, as Representative Loving mentioned, and gave us that famous speech that we often quote. In 1967, Dr. King was in a school in Philadelphia, and he was speaking with a student body and encouraging them to think about their future. And this is where I'm going to bring my kids back into this. And he said to them, you need a blueprint for your life. And I sit down with my kids, and I look back on history, and I look back on all the leaders that we've had to look to, like Dr. King, and the examples that they've given us. And these men stood up, and they fought, and they represented people when they couldn't represent themselves. And that's what I install in my kids. I say, what is it you're going to do today to help others? How are you going to stand and fight for somebody else who cannot fight for themselves? And that is my encouragement to us here, whether we're at the beginning of our lives or maybe in the twilight of our years. My encouragement to you is to think today, what is it that you're going to do today to serve somebody else? And think back on your life, and what is it you want as your epitaph to say, he, she stood up for these things during their life. And that's what as I get to the twilight of my years, I'm halfway through right now, I hope, that I can look back and say, I did these things, and I helped my community, and I served in the pattern that was given to me by these leaders like Dr. King from the past. We have many challenges ahead of us this year, Madam Speaker, and I'd just like to leave with one quote, which has already been quoted today, if I may.
Please proceed.
Martin Luther King said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. And we've got a great year ahead of us, and I plan on serving hard. And I encourage the rest of us to do so also. Thank you, Madam Speaker.